thank you everyone that's here, braving the weather, COVID, all the dragons out there. They're trying to keep us from our appointed rounds. I really appreciate Carla and Brenda putting this together. I told her, and I think she's planning to make this an annual event. So we'll have Dickinson, Whitman, and Frost in Conroe. And it'll be another great addition to our literary community. Tonight, in order for us to have as much time with poems as possible, we gave you the little bio, so I don't have to, we don't have to be introduced with these long bios. I really appreciate my sister poets being here tonight, Dede Fox, Montgomery County Poet Laureate, and Professor Janet Lowery, both of them longtime friends and colleagues in the world of letters. For you that haven't been to a poetry reading, kind of the protocol is that we don't clap after the poem. You can click your fingers if you want to, if you're compelled to. And it's going to be, after we read, all three of us are going to read some Frost poems, and then we're going to read poems of our own. And then after that, we'd like to invite you to come up and read your favorite Frost poem. We're limiting it to 30 lines because Frost could get pretty wordy. And so if you have a poem that's 30 lines or less and you really love it, come on up and read it. If it's more than 30 lines, go ahead and read what you have, 30 lines of it. When we get through, get finished, we all brought books out there. If you'd like to purchase a book, we're here. We're happy to give you one. And to begin with, Carla, I think, would like to come up and say a few words about why this event first happened, the seeds to this event. Come on up, Carla.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our inaugural Vince D'Amico Memorial Poetry Reading at the USTMAX Center. My name is Carla Alcindor, and I'm the director of the USTMAX Center, and it's our pleasure to have you all here tonight. It's so wonderful to see this full house that we have on such a rainy night. Thank you for braving the elements to be here with us. Before we get started, before I turn the podium back over to Dave, I wanted to take a few minutes to explain why we are having the Memorial Vince D'Amico Poetry Reading. This is Vince right here behind me. Who is Vince, and why is it important for us to do this? So Vince was a wonderful, wonderful friend and benefactor of the University of St. Thomas. He went to the university. In fact, he was a member of the second class of students at UST, and he graduated as part of the second graduating class in 1952. Since that time, he maintained his relationship with the university and was ever supportive of the University of St. Thomas. And so when he heard that we were interested in expanding our reach into Montgomery County, he knew that he wanted to be a part of it. From this magazine that we have here, the USTMAX magazine, this is Vince on the cover. This is our first edition, and it was only appropriate that we put Vince on the cover and that we tell his story.
Dede would be the first reader, I guess. And then Janet will come up and read, and then I'll finish up. And Dede, of course, is not only the Poet Laureate of Montgomery County, she's just a dynamic person for the literary arts in our community and in the Houston area. And you can tell from her bio that she's a busy person.
Okay, thank you guys for coming out tonight. I know it's not the best weather and it's hard to kind of make yourself go out when it's wet outside. I appreciate it. The first poem that I'm going to do, I'm setting the alarm so that I'm sure that I don't take too long, is one that we all learned in school, I'm sure. And some of you probably can recite it from memory, but I just thought we needed to hear Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening. You know, I wanted us to start with that. Like a lot of writers, I've been taking a lot of Zoom classes. And the nice thing about Zoom classes is that we can get together with people from, I've been in one class on Monday nights where there's a guy from Australia who gets up early in the morning and joins the class. It's a poetry class. And in that class, one of the first poems we looked at was Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening. We were talking about line and integrity of lines. And the interesting thing about this poem, when I read it to you or when you recite it with me, if you'll notice, every line has got 2 stops in it. And those pauses between the words kind of allow us to think about the last word and the next word that might be coming. And it's great to set the tone and the rhythm. And those spaces are called caesuras. So this is Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it's queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Okay, so that's just a masterpiece. Yeah, it's interesting to be asked to come and read some of your poems after you have read some of Robert Frost. It's like, I'm not going to put my poems in between. I'll put my poems at the end. Okay, and the next one is Fire and Ice. Some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. And then the last Robert Frost poem that I'm going to read is one that I wasn't familiar with until I just started looking for ones that I thought that Dave and Janet might not choose. And this is called Desert Places. Snow falling and night falling fast. Oh, fast. In a field I looked into going past, and the ground almost covered smooth in snow, but a few weeds and stubble showing last. The woods around it have it. It is theirs. All animals are smothered in their lairs. I am too absent-spirited to count. The loneliness includes me unawares. And lonely as it is, that loneliness will be more lonely ere it will be less. A blanker whiteness of benighted snow with no expression, nothing to express. They cannot scare me with their empty spaces between stars, on stars where no human race is. I have it in me so much nearer home to scare myself with my own desert places. That's kind of the flip side of Stopping by the Woods. And I think I thought of that because of all the people that have so much snow that they're dealing with right now in the Northeast. Okay, and then with my own poems, I'm going to read from On Wings of Silence. This is a novel in verse. And I think publishers would say it's all in poetry. To me, when it's a long narrative like that, there are some parts that aren't absolutely poetry, but I tried to pick some that are. Okay, let's see. Oh, and this is for all the women in here that are of a certain age. This is called Good Girls, because we were all good girls. Never leave the house without putting on their faces. They wear bras, girdles, and slips underneath their shirtwaists. Wear white gloves to tea parties. Eat no more than 2 finger sandwiches and 1 sweet treat. They do not clatter forks, burp, or break china. Have a 9 o'clock curfew on weekdays and 12 o'clock on weekends because Mother says nothing good ever happens after midnight. Don't have sex before marriage. In my father's words, if you give away the milk, why would anyone want to buy the cow? And I bet some of you have heard these things before. Study hard, make good grades, good enough to get into a good college where they can meet a good husband. Marry by age 22. And 2 to 4 years later, have 2 to 4 children with equal numbers of boys and girls. Mother quotes a neighbor who went to finishing school. Says Mrs. Charles Pearson learned a woman should never talk about politics, religion, or sex in mixed company. Easy for Mrs. Charles Pearson to say. She's home all day with 5 snotty kids. Talk about finished. Okay, and this is in the eyes of the 17, almost 18-year-old protagonist named Diana. And she travels to Mexico for her freshman year in college in 1968 when the Olympics are going to be in Mexico for the great adventure that it may afford her. And there was a beautiful statue at the gates of Chapultepec Park, and the statue was the Diana. For Diana the Huntress, is it possible to fall in love at first sight with a statue? I wait across the street for the university shuttle, but all I see is Diana, my mythical namesake and guardian of Chapultepec Park. Her sculpted bronze body is as curved as the bow she holds, its sharpened arrow pointing north, shooting stars, hunting beasts, guarding El Paseo de la Reforma, walkway to freedom. Hair flowing in the mist from tiered fountains, Diana is my compass, directing me to all things unexplored, waiting to be hunted. And then the next poem is I Am Diana. In the myths, there's always a cost for the quest, a flaw in the character, whose story ends in tragedy. What will it cost me to be as free as Diana? Maybe I'll be frightened, maybe I'll be lonely, maybe I'll be damaged, maybe I'll be ordinary. Will I be the hunted or the hunter? And then just before the Olympics, there is a lot of turmoil because it was in 1968 when a lot of students were acting out. And the week before the start of the Olympics, the government decided to crack down on anybody who was demonstrating. And Diana's new boyfriend is in the crackdown. So this is right before. That happened on October 2nd in 1968. This is Chapultepec Park, September 25th, 1968. Like Diego Rivera's flower cellar, a brown woman kneels next to baskets of lilies, irises, sunflowers. I buy an armful, remember Guillermo's kiss as I walk through Chapultepec Park among the helado vendors, pinwheel spinners, football players. Red and yellow balloons snare running children in their dangling strings. I follow a winding path to a sculpture garden where some warmed statues embrace in a vacuum. Like a shadow, silence fills the plaza. An absence of sound pulls me from a flower-filled reverie. I catch my breath, dart down a path to the broad Paseo de la Reforma, the avenue deserted. No rattling cars, smoke-belching buses, shawl-draped women with bundles and babies, stiff-legged soldiers goose-stepped in tight rows, rifles, bayonets, bazookas against their shoulders. Thump, 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 thump. At roads curve, tanks roll. Mechanical monsters, geared, devour everything in their path. I run. My sandals slap the tender undersides of my bare feet as I weave in and out of razor-straight lines. Blank-faced soldiers, blinded by command. My heart pounds like their thumping boots. I tear across the avenue, trailing torn lilies, bruised irises, crushed sunflowers. Thank you.
So Vince D'Amico, by the way, used to drop in at the English department at the University of St. Thomas frequently. And we even invited him to a department meeting, one or two. And he took some students out to lunch. Really wonderful person, very generous, spirited. And so it was a pleasure knowing him. I'm grateful for the invitation to be here from Dave, and thank you all for being here. I'll read a short poem of his, then a long poem, and maybe one more short one. But I'm going to read Tree at My Window because I love having trees at a bedroom window. I just have to have a tree outside my window. So, Tree at my window. Tree at my window, window tree. My sash is lowered when night comes on, but let there never be curtain drawn between you and me. Vague dream head lifted out of the ground, and thing next most diffuse to cloud. Not all your light tongues talking aloud could be profound, but tree, I have seen you taken and tossed, and if you have seen me when I slept, you have seen me when I was taken and swept and all but lost. That day she put our heads together, fate had her imagination about her. Your head so much concern with outer, mine with inner weather. And I'm going to read After Apple Picking, which is a long poem, but I did, as an undergrad summer job with my college roommate, we did try, because I'm from central New York, and there are orchards up there. I forgot to click my phone, so I forgot that. There were apple orchards, and we tried to pick apples. We didn't even last a full week. It is such hard work. You know, you have a burlap sack, you have to fill it, then you go up and down. And the ladder round, by the way, is for the old-fashioned ladders, some of you will know, that just had a dowel, a round spool, like not a step. So it was not comfortable to stand all day on that kind of ladder. And he mentions this here. After apple picking, my long two-pointed ladders sticking through a tree toward heaven still, and there's a barrel that I didn't fill beside it, and there may be 2 or 3 apples I didn't pick upon some bough, but I am done with apple picking now. Essence of winter's sleep is on the night, the scent of apples I am drowsing off. I cannot rub the strangeness from my sight I got from looking through a pane of glass I skimmed this morning from the drinking trough and held against the world of hoary grass. It melted, and I let it fall and break, but I was well upon my way to sleep before it fell, and I could tell what form my dreaming was about to take. Magnified apples appear and disappear, stem end and blossom end, and every fleck of russet showing clear. My instep arch not only keeps the ache, it keeps the pressure of a ladder round. I feel the ladder sway as the boughs bend, and I keep hearing from the cellar bin the rumbling sound of load on load of apples coming in. For I have had too much of apple picking. I am overtired of the great harvest I myself desired. There were 10,000 fruit to touch, cherish in hand, lift down and not let fall. For all that struck the earth, no matter if not bruised or spiked with stubble, went surely to the cider apple heap as of no worth. One can see what will trouble this sleep of mine, whatever sleep it is. Were he not gone, the woodchuck could say whether it's like his long sleep, as I describe its coming on, or just some human sleep. You know, that is 42 lines, it's 3 sonnets, all linked together, that poem. It's an amazing poem. What was I going to read? See, this is where the Buster Keaton thing comes in. Oh, I know, I was just gonna read Dust of Snow, and I'll just do it from memory. The Dust of Snow. The way a crow shook down on me, the dust of snow from a hemlock tree, has given my heart a change of mood, and spared one part of a day I had rued. A little short poem. And like Dede, I feel like, oh God, when you read your own poems. But Dave did ask us to read something that had to do with either nature or fate. And I have nature poems like scattered about in my possession, and then one is in here that I'll read. So this is, I'm from central New York, and I have a cottage on a lake up there, and I go there for the summer. So final night at the lake, 2019. My bags all packed and stacked against the back door, I lie on my back on the dock and wait for a last shooting star on which to bring a wish into existence before I walk up the flat stone path and head upstairs to ship off for dreamland. Tomorrow I'll paint the cedar shingle roof of the wishing well moon mist. Tether the floating dock to an old pine tree that leans over the cattails. Sweep up the back hallway for the last time. Click down the tiny padlocks that secure the place. Then drive to the airport and return to civilization with all its buzz. But tonight on the dock, the buzz, see, it came right in. Exactly on time. I'll just wait for you. But tonight on the dock, I shiver in the cool air and do what I've done so many summer nights since I was a child. Scan the night sky for white jewels and watch for one to fall down into my wide open hands. And then this is, I hope you know what a paddleboard is, all of you, but I have a paddleboard, and that's what I like to ride to get out on the lake as the sun is setting. So this is on a paddleboard at the lake, and it is during sunset. So, and chicory flowers grow up north. I don't know, maybe they're down here too, but they're a very vivid blue. Astride my blue board, I stop the paddle to stand stock still, the board in pause, afloat above the looking glass of water, streaked with pink in an upside down sky, the dome of sunset in heaven, awash with stains of lavender, gold, and pink horsetail wisps. To the south, a galleon of ghost clouds sails over the dam, and I, my head in the sky, my feet pinned fast to the board, stuck fast in smooth water, I turn elemental among the old cloud deities dwelling here, whose underbellies bloom a scarlet blue. On a surface I blend into, standing. Now a dark shade of purple billows out due west and rolls around the horizon in silent swaths of cotton cloth. The pink mackerel sky shifts the north end to a red chalk line and brightens further into crimson coals spread in curved smudges above the shoreline of pines and hemlocks. The water along the north end's tree-lined reflection shot through with indigo blots, pale lavender smears, and blue scarlet dots, a violent sash flaring into fire. My brain, cooled by the water's blue-red seams, the upper dome of chicory blue sky shifts to gold in midsummer sunset dreams. And then I'll end with this poem from my book, The Pugilist's Daughter, which is about growing up with, my father was a World War II vet, and he suffered from PTSD. He was on the front lines in Germany and fought in the Battle of the Bulge, which is the worst battle of World War II. So, but it's about that and just my own sort of spiritual, awakenings as a young person. So this is called Greensfield Park, North Side, age 13. Clouds drifted the sky that summer day in small town, upstate New York. Flat on the grass, I stared up until I slept, then woke, then felt the ground beneath my back clasp onto me to hold my form the way a mother holds a child. I leaned into the earth. Shivers shot up and down my spine. The sky's grace fell into my eye invisibly, and then everything in the universe shifted into place. All gloom and adolescent despair evaporated into air. I flattened more against the earth's broad back, my eyes fixed on the spectacle of sky, as if I'd never seen that blue before. I held my breath. I held the ground. I think I heard inside my ears my heart pound out its steady, living sound. I knew what was happening. I'd come into disbelief, and I was not meant to live in disbelief. So now the infinite pulsed through me a message, a reminder about our deal, our pact, my place, its power. And so a calm came over me, a relief and peace, the kind that passeth all understanding. The sun warmed my face, the grass cooled my skin, the good earth held me in her cradle rocking. A sensibility beneath and above included me in its counting. My doubt fled in the face of that rich harmony, and blessed that day, I accepted the blessing. Thank you.
Two roads diverge in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for one another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverge in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And personal favorite of mine is Acquainted with the Night. Most you night hawks, I'm a night person. And this one resonates with me for that reason, if nothing else. I've been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his beat and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet. And far away, an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye. And further still, at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one acquainted with the night. As I said, alluded to, Frost was an adulterer. I hate to say it like that, but he wrote a poem for his wife. It's a wonderful poem, and it's written in a really unique way, and it's entitled "The Silken Tent." And so, he uses the metaphor of a tent, a silken tent for his wife and her ways. She is as in a field, a silken tent at midday when sunny summer breeze has dried the dew and all its ropes relent, so that in guise it gently sways at ease, and its supporting cedar pole, that is the pinnacle to heavenward, and signifies the sureness of the soul. It seems to owe naught to any single cord, but strictly held by none, is loosely bound by countless silken ties of love and thought to everything on earth and the compass round, and only by one's going slightly taut in the capriciousness of summer air is of the slightest bondage made aware. So, I don't know, I don't think, I'm totally intimidated by his poetry, like all our other poets, but I think I can do better with my wife than he did. So I'll start out by reading Pragma Eros, which means pragmatic erotica or lust, pragmatic lust. My eyes ran down the flexing muscle of leg to a slightly turned in landing of foot as you planted a while, jogging smooth in front of me on and around Hidalgo streets, and later the narrow small town streets of Conroe, those many years ago. I remember us stopping at Sacred Heart Church, vacant inside. We could hear our runner's breath in the hallowed air of the sanctuary as we crept down the main aisle, stopping to bend and kneel on the oriental rug covered steps before the altar under the Gothic life-size Christ, each with our own thoughts. No prayers for me, but amusing wonder in feeling our oneness in the silence that surrounded our presence, as we somehow became one of the holy relics symbolizing Eden. She blinks with eyes blue and grayish, especially when a camera flashes, and curves down from those hypnotic orbits around the subtle cushions of cheek, framing an intensity, a mystery, a primal base intuitism, residing in the multitude of auburn gray curls that play above milky brow and down along the stronger, broader shoulders than the graceful torso would have implied. On another, and hiding below the cascade of hair on the sublime ivory nape of neck, falling to lithe breaths as they are freed from the binding obligations of rank and civility, always yearning to move from softness of their nursing down, smooth belly by way of calf and velvety thigh, the byways of longing toward the exotic fleece of ultimate exotic desire. These remain a part of me that does not ebb with time. It only flows and flows and flows. I decided to read some poems. These poems I'm reading are personal poems, obviously, and they haven't been published yet, may never be published. But we had the privilege to take care of Nancy's mother in her last days, and it was an incredible experience. And this poem came out of the experience. Two Mother Marys in home hospice. Ruth the Great, that's what all the kids and grandchildren began to call her. It was only after Ruth began hospice that I noticed the garland of roses draped above the head of her bed. And for some reason, it stunned me, as if it had appeared in some mysterious way, like the bed of Castilian roses in Juan Diego's tilma, although I was certain that Nancy had placed it there, even before the room had become Ruth's final worldly home, with her selected treasures of photos, family memories, and the many Mary images in every form of artistic expression. Modest furnishings placed shrine-like around her, and she always looked posed in graceful repose, like the many Marys she adored, her snow-white hair still strikingly framing her kind face, and those hauntingly lovely eyes, icy blue eyes, that still, like the Sacred Mother, seemed to see everything before, and something otherly, entities well beyond our eyes. Ruth was in transition, both greatly present and joyously gone to them, and soon with them. We took a trip to Montana. We have relatives up there, and they took us to this really unique steakhouse that had pig races. Anybody been to a pig race? And the irony of it is that the people named the pigs really unique names. And this poem came out of the pig race experience. There's a term in here, checkmate, and it's Czechoslovakian mate, because there's a Czech community and all the beer was Czech. So, Bear Creek Downs, Montana, where pigs fly. At the Bear Creek Saloon and Steakhouse, the many varied faces reflect the diverse concerns and existences in our ununited states. And after steaks and checkmate brews, they moved to the back deck of the rustic building that oversees the pig track of Bear Creek Downs, where they are crowded together on rough cedar bleachers to watch 12 races of 5 grown pigs, each fly around the small track to a sweetgrass finish line. Each race beginning with a familiar Kentucky Derby bugle call, blaring into the mob. Their faces are now amazingly sporting the same silly grins, their many opinions, issues, political biases, swept away with the same single awareness and thought. A delightful escape from the worries and divisiveness, angst, to the sheer joy of cheering on the unlikely, mostly hairless harriers, charged out of their gates with such names as Pig Newton, C. Piglet, Pocahontas, Hamlet, Ozzy Osbourne, Pig of War, Rumpelpigskin, Ed McCam, Barbecue. The smirks of glee are unanimous and even unaffected when in the last race, Nancy Pelosi, Pork Rind, Hillary Clinton Ham, and Donald Rump lose by a snout to the underdog, just a wiener. We have all been brought together in this unlikely fellowship and realization that we can all agree on at least one thing. This day, that nothing is truly impossible when you witness a large group of Americans with the same astonished expression of laughter and joy watching pigs fly. So I'll now wax a little philosophical with another poem that's fairly new. I went through a period of great distress in the 70s and searching, and like everybody does, I guess, at one time in their life. And the thing that saved me was an anthology of Kierkegaard, which you know, it's kind of weird because instead of getting his Bible, I had an anthology of Kierkegaard by my bed, you know, and I'd pull it out and read it. But anyway, this is a poem entitled Kierkegaard's Lament. Kierkegaard wrote, "You can't separate the slimy from the fish." And I've thought about the quote on many occasions since studying his tortured body of work. And when I think of my country, my relationship, my theology, the vast world of life's dichotomies, we are queried with each day of our waking moments. I must agree. However, I would add, you can separate the slimy from the fish. It always kills the fish. And then a little small one I wrote for a friend that was going through some trials. Hope. Hope, like an eagle, tries the skies, alone, strong wings, and piercing eyes. Doubt, like murders of crows, feeding off each other, live close to the ground. Eagles never worry, and crows. And I have a whole section in my book about canoeing, and this is going to be added to it. It's entitled Intelligent Designs, which of course alludes to another philosophy about creation. A canoe is not designed to be motionless. Its beginnings and endings shape invites movement, like the free will of our lives. We can retreat with or without purpose, or move forward, which will always require intention. Floating aimlessly eventually only grounds us in constant state of reflection, which Kierkegaard wrote is the greatest sin. See how I'm doing here. So this will be my last one. This is, I started writing this in 1991. It has not reached a point where I can publish it or send it to anybody, but it's a sestina, but it's not a very true sestina. In other words, there's some flaws in it. And it's full of, you'll see, it's full of too many descriptive words. But I call it, in the beginning, I called it the mother of invention. And as the years have gone by, I now call it the mother. So the mother of invention and broken Baroque sestina. Wallace Stevens called her the golden lady in the silver mirror, the same munificent lady whose countenance shone like the glowing night lights that burnished Berlin that summer. The whorehound Soren Kierkegaard left Copenhagen and his beloved lady Regina far, holding in the terrible vortex of his torrid mind that she would be his princess and wait, yearning for his change. From night of faith to night of resignation. Change that in the end burned to rather a white-hot silver crown of despair. Circumscribing the storm in his gentle mind, like Stevens, he should have known what shone within him was no longer his. It had become the lady, purified and transmuted by internal flames. A bold summer voice, born from the fiery torque of tongues, from a summer flint whose spark smelts the simple soul of an ideal. Change forging a metal with the qualities of the ghostly light. The lady, like Dante's Beatrice, this being is poured from the silver skull of God, yet as a kind of communo omnibus, shown as white-robed consistory to we earthbound minds. Here on earth, the multitude are bent to the flesh, without a mind for a love that could only be born to the smelting summer clarity. With no inner eye, they are blind to the sun clothes shone on high, for all these pilgrims of the dark earth, for whom change is a lover grasped for, an illusion never held, are framed in silver. They are reaching blindly in the image itself. The earthly lady they might hold from the flash of polychromic scenes, not the lady internal, eternal, the roaring charioteer of the mind, whose wheels turn on the axis of time, spinning threads of silver to be an artfully woven fabric for the finest of summer vestments, for an eternal body articulating the season's change, honoring the adorned work, a brilliant truth that must be shown again and again, and because of the manner in which it is shown as a reflection of one man's conception of the golden lady, envisaged in a simple silver mirror of celestial change, there will be born the one new true night of the opening of minds, suspended in timeless joy, extending the many summers from the darkest winter through this bright passage of silver. And that lost the page. The final blessedness is shown. We the changeling, the fusion of mind with the heaven's sacred flower, whose womb brought summer's noble love to change creation's veil to golden bounty, set in stars of silver. Thank you. We now would like to invite you to come up and read your favorite Frost poem. And just a reminder, 30 lines, no more than 30 lines, but any poem that you would like. If you haven't picked one yet and you just want to read one, you can almost open his book and do this and you'll find a good poem, okay? So who would like to come up first? George.
I first read my Robert Frost poem when I was probably 6th grade. Some of you know I grew up in central Kansas and on a small farm with insufficient 160 acres, but we 3 miles away was a country school, a little one-room school. It was a brick building, pretty nice building. I was my kids are astounded to know that I was the only kid in my class from the time I was in the 3rd grade to the time I was in the 8th when I went to a public school down there. But amazingly, it was almost like a free study. We had our assignments on the board, and one teacher who was usually pretty good. And when we finished the assignments for the week, which hopefully was around Wednesday afternoon, we had to go to the teacher and recite her lessons. And we could go to the library and just read different stuff after we or when we got it done. But if we were found in the library and didn't recite well, we were in big trouble. Big trouble. Anyway, that's probably where I first found Robert Frost, and I've lost my place. There it is. But I grew up on a farm which had a lot of fences. Fences, if you've been around farms much, or just the only way to go. You got to have them. And I spent a good portion of my summers fixing fences. So Mending Wall by Robert Frost, I think, means quite a bit to me. Mending Wall. I'm just going to read, it's fairly long. I'm going to read the first and last. Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, I've got it. Yeah, that's much better than but it's not divided into. I'll stick with you.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's much easier to read than this, by the way. Okay, Mending Wall. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that ends the frozen ground swell underneath it, and spills the upper borders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I've come after them and made repair, I've done that too, where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give some offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to them, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather say it for myself. I'd see them there bringing a stone grasped firmly at the top in each hand like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only in the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. He says again, good fences make good neighbors.
First of all, I'd like to thank Dave and the St. Thomas people and Dede and the thing. And I feel like a 10-watt bulb in a 100-watt world up here with these folks. But Dave didn't, two things you didn't disclose. One was that there was a line limit. And the second was, I've done Dave's workshops here at St. Thomas and at the college, and George has, and Patty and Mary Margaret. So if you haven't done one, you're missing a really great experience. Now, when we were doing that, you didn't tell us that adultery was a prerequisite for being a poet. So I'm not a real poet. And so I was struggling with, plus this is 40 lines, so I can either read 30 or I'll go fast. But I was trying to find a poem that I didn't think I figured, all the famous poems, people didn't want to read something that had already been read. And so I Googled unknown poems by Robert Frost. And this one came up, and it has a really interesting history. He wrote it in 1918 and stuck it in a book where it remained until 2006 when it was discovered. The guy had donated his Robert Frost collection, book collection, to some university or whatever, and the guy was thumbing through the books and pulled out this poem. And even Dave hadn't heard of it. It's called War Thoughts at Home. On the back side of the house, where it wears no paint to the weather, and so shows most its age, suddenly blue jays rage and flash in blue feather. It is late in an afternoon, more gray with snow to fall than white with fallen snow, when it is blue jay and crow, or no bird at all. So someone heeds from within the flurry of bird war, and rising from her chair, a little bent over with care not to scatter on the floor the sewing in her lap, comes to the window to see. At sight of her dim face, the birds all cease for a space and cling close in a tree. And one says to the rest, We must just watch our chance and escape one by one, though the fight is no more done than the war in France. Than the war in France, she thinks of a winter camp where soldiers for France are made. She draws down the window shade and it glows with an early lamp. On that old side of the house, the uneven sheds stretch back, shed behind shed in train, like cars that have long lain dead on a track.
So my name is Courtney and I work for University of St. Thomas, and I had the good fortune to get to meet Mr. D'Amico Vince and work with him the last few years of his life, and got pretty close to him and his family. And so when he passed, I said, well, what was his favorite Robert Frost poem? That never came up in conversation. And I was told it was this poem that I'm about to read. It's called The Gift Outright, and that poem was recited by Robert Frost at JFK's inauguration. But what's funny about that story is he had written a poem for the inauguration called Dedication, but the sun was so bright, there was a glare, he couldn't read it. So he recited this from memory. I do not have it memorized. So here we go. Here's The Gift Outright. The land was ours before we were the land's. She was our land, more than 100 years. Before we were her people, she was ours. In Massachusetts, in Virginia. But we were England's, still colonials, possessing what we still were unpossessed by. Possessed by what we now no more possessed. Something we were withholding made us weak until we found out that it was ourselves. We were withholding from our land of living, and forthwith found salvation in surrender. Such as we were, we gave ourselves outright. The deed of gift was many deeds of war. To the land vaguely realizing westward, but still unstoried, artless, unenhanced. Such as she was, such as she would become.
When Dave so graciously agreed to help us put this event together, I was so grateful, because I've never done a poetry reading before. It just occurred to me that what better way to pay tribute to Vince than with a poetry reading. And so not only have I never put one together, I've never attended one before. So I'm so very grateful that we have an expert poet laureate right here as part of our USTMAX faculty to come and pull this together and bring together such wonderful professional poets to be here with us and to attract such a great audience. So I thought, well, I should put my mouth where my money is, or money where my mouth is, and take part in this. And so I did go to the library, and I got a couple of books on Frost and took a look through and flipped through the pages to see if I could come across a poem that I thought would be a nice one to read tonight. And I really didn't know if it would come together. I told Dave, I don't want anybody else to pick my poem because I'm only going to prepare one. And so I flipped through pages and I finally came across one that sort of spoke to me. And Dave has taught me that poetry just speaks to you. And there's not necessarily an explanation for that, but if it speaks to you in a way, then it's special to you. And so I chose this one for whatever reason. It did speak to me. And it's called In England by Robert Frost. Alone in rain I sat today on top of a gate beside the way, and a bird came near with muted bill, and a watery breeze kept blowing chill from over the hill behind me. I could not tell what in me stirred to hill and gate and rain and bird, till lifting hair and bathing brow, the watery breeze came fresher now from over the hill to remind me. The bird was the kind that follows a ship. The rain was salt upon my lip. The hill was an undergoing wave. and the gate on which I balanced brave was a great ship's iron railing. For the breeze was a watery English breeze, always fresh from one of the seas. And the country life the English lead in beechen wood and clover mead is never far from sailing.
You did very good.